Good morning, my name is Shklyaruk, and I'm a head of the Center for Advanced Management Solutions and the academic director of the Center for Chief Digital Transformation Officers at RANEPA, and we'll be talking about the main topics of this new year, 2020, quality of government data, what are the prospects, and I'm lucky to have distinguished panelists that deal with policy making on a daily basis, how to collect them, how to make them more available, more accessible to different audiences. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, Viktor Nichiporchuk, Deputy Minister of the Emergencies Ministry, Mikhail Petrov, Head of the Digital Transformation Department of the Council Chamber, Anatoly Dubanov, Head of Digital Economy Development Department of the Ministry of Economic Development, and Oleg Kachanov, Deputy Minister of Digital Development, Telecommunications and Media. So, government data, public data, is going to be one of the priorities in 2022. Why? There are three major trends. First, we're seeing an increased demand for evidence-based policy making. We will not focus too much on it. We talked a lot about it yesterday and in late 2021. Definitely a switch to performance-based policymaking and evidence-based policymaking requires high-quality data, the ability to link different data, and the latest Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded for finding the links between policies and outcomes, and that was based on microdata. And that was the data based on unemployment, and that required a collection of data which have not been available previously. And second, we're seeing a burgeoning pace of digitalization. E-government services are popping up here and there. There are so many new services that rely on big data, and that generates huge arrays of data which the government can rely on to feed it to AI and to use it for more advanced research and analysis. And third, digital transformation officers and many agencies understand that without data exchange, without an awareness of where the data are, what are the benchmark data, and how fast you can exchange and link them, that is a must-have. So these are the three major trends. Can our government learn to find linkages between the data? Will we have finally data pools in the government? And I know the different ministries and agencies have their own silos, they have their own data pools. And we'll be able to link them, and will the national database be successful in 2022? So my first question is just to set the tone, and I will address it to all of you. So what is quality of public data for you? What's your definition? What are your benchmarks? What are your KPIs at your agencies? Mr. Nichiporchuk, over to you. We define quality of public data as something that meets your demands and that doesn't have any negative effects. And I mean, we can draw a parallel, use analogy of food products. You can only assess quality when your data are assessed, when you have a consumer. You might have a shop window of data, and it might seem to you consistent and fine, but you need a consumer to provide judgment on its quality. And second, if your data lead to an adverse effect, it means it's poor quality data. We often face a case when it seems the machine learning model is great, but the outcomes doesn't come true. The data might be good, but they're applied not in a proper way, and even deep controlled quality assurance doesn't mean that the data is going to be really good. I remember we had the first training, and I think Mr. Dubanov was one of the students there, and we had a joke that in 2100, finally we have the resistance of the machines and robots, and they attacked the cities and towns with just stones and sticks because they were trained on historical data. So that was the joke. And I think that is similar to what the accounts chamber might do. You know, you need to be trained to train your models on the right data. What is good quality data for you? Well, thank you for raising this important issue. Indeed, the quality of public data is important for us, and we work with very formal data, official data, and we use them for research and to identify any breaches. And the second part of the job means that the data have to be somehow legally significant, legally material. They have to be timely, they have to be full, they have to be error-free, but these also need to be legally material data, and that is one of the criteria of quality. It might not be that important for other agencies, but it's relevant for us, and this is why we have to work quite a lot in our data management system to define those quality assurance rules, to make sure the data fit those criteria. And another aspect I'd like to point out, speed is important. We need to be able to hook up to new sources of data very fast. Our inspectors always look at new sources of data, and those new sources emerge in the world very fast, and this is why we need to leverage the data as soon as possible. We need to make sure that our inspectors can get access to them and use them in their tools, their research tools. Mr. Dubanov, now you're head of Digital Economy Development Department, but you also worked in one of the Russian regions, and I'm sure that you had a lot of issues previously, and now you're in the other camp, so to speak. So you are in the Ministry of Economic Development, you're not in the region. What are your impressions? What progress have you seen over this year? What's happening at the ministerial level? What is high-quality public data for you? Well, initially, yes, I was a student and at this digital courses, and you were our coach, you were our tutor, and we shared some of the insights. Okay, that was just some reminiscences. So, back to data. Interoperability, entirety, consistency, accessibility, and coherence, and timeliness. These are the key criteria that we set for any public data. These are the minimum requirements, the must-haves for the data. And once you have such data, it would improve policymaking, not just in terms of the economy, but across the board. There's 6 main areas, and if the data do not fit these requirements, then something is going to be missing. Since we live in a fast-paced world, we need extremely high-quality data. And you were also part of the new part in the preparations for a new bill. And it's not just about interface. We have this big database, and it helps us to route the data. But we also need to focus on what is known as benchmark data. And I hope that the bills will be passed, and the concerns that our population have, that our people have about speed and quality will be resolved. Thank you, and I'd like to ask some other speakers. You will be able to do a wrap-up of this first round of questions. We've been talking about the public data management system for 3 years, and finally we have it. It's a great achievement, and all the agencies now harness the data. We have these shop windows of data. I know that we can introduce the shop windows in other agencies without paying for this software, thanks to the Ministry of Digital Development. That's a great case study. So, what's your take on this? What is your priority? Thank you, Ms. Shklyaruk. High-quality data implies we don't make mistakes. If a citizen applies for benefits or subsidies, they have to receive them. And we don't have mistakes that the cars they sold 5 years ago still are registered, and it appears that they have to pay taxes for it, etc. So we need to avoid such errors. And right now, we're trying to figure out that our shop windows are error-free. Data quality implies compliance with requirements. You need to set those requirements first, and need to oversee the execution to check for compliance, and to have some regular, comprehensive activities to streamline quality. Data could vary. There could be data arrays that would be the source for, or the evidence for policymaking. And Mr. Nichiporchuk talked about modeling, but there are also transaction-based data, and requirements to different types of data are different. In terms of arrays, they have to be anonymous. The data have to be anonymous. You can't track, you shouldn't be able to track who the data belong to. But in terms of the detailed data, you need to make sure that the name is written properly as it is in your ID, so that there are no missing characters, so that you get the right transactions that you're supposed to get. So going back to data quality, first the requirements that depend on the type of the data. Second is the procedures and the rules of regular controls. And third is some systemic, technical, administrative methodology activities to improve this quality. Thank you so much. And my next question is to Mr. Petrov and Mr. Dubanov, a more hands-on question. In 2021, can you give us any case studies on your progress in improving data quality, something you're proud of? Mr. Petrov will definitely talk about the administrative issues. because he represents the accounts chamber. So it's not just about technology. Technology doesn't make sense without people, without talents. We need to make sure that our officials, our civil servants, know what good data are. They need to be qualified. So I'm sure that Mr. Petrov has huge experience in this. Absolutely. What we call the human factor is key in this. These operations. You can buy any software, you can set it up, but if your staff doesn't know to work with it, it's going to be time and money wasted, and it's taxpayers' money, mind you. So we need to build capacity, and last year I'd like to focus on two areas. First, data management. We have the institution of data stewards. Every department now has a data steward, like a data manager. We've introduced a huge training campaign for them. They're not data scientists. They're not data technology. They are inspectors, and they needed to reskill, and you just need to provide something like Data Management 101. And we invested heavily into it. We set up this training program, we implemented it, and data stewards now work with those stewards. They fill in the data source IDs, they do those meta descriptions, and we're now working with the national data management system, and I hope we'll be able to team up with other agencies, ministries, so that we have this single data space where our inspectors could rely on. They say, okay, I need to get access to this facility, I need full information, the financials, and some real estate, any financial transactions, something on the staff, so that it should be just one click away. It should be very easily accessible. And the second area is that we have several dozens of cases on data. So we talk about evidence-based policymaking. Actually, the accounts chamber doesn't take any policymaking decisions. We verify them for efficiency, etc. And last year, we had several success stories when our inspectors relied on those research tools, and they've successfully worked with the data. Instead of checking and verifying thousands of transactions, instead of spending that time, I mean, currently we need to check all of the real estate, the rent rates, etc., and we do the benchmarking, and we use the tools to do that benchmarking, and our inspectors can then come up with some proposals on whether those decisions have been efficient. So these are the two areas I'd like to raise. Mr. Dubanov. The bill on the national data management system was a milestone for 2021, and currently we need to improve communications between municipal authorities, federal authorities, regional authorities, and we also need to work with the private sector. Companies that can work with data, they are 20 to 30% more successful than their peers who use conventional methods. So if we can learn to work with the data, then that will help to improve the economy of Russia. And we're also fine-tuning some of our research tools, and we now have our analytical center and the coordination center, and instead of just a agency-specific system. It's become the linchpin of our management, public management system, and so finally it's all about data-based, evidence-based. Yes, everyone's been talking about it, but trust me, it's not that easy, and the 6 requirements I mentioned are really hard to achieve. They need to work closely with all the agencies, with all the state bodies, to be able to make it happen. And we conducted a nationwide census. We were engaged in this mission. We produced those tablets with the operating system called Aurora, and it's Russian-based. So finally, we got the data not on paper like we did in 2010, but everything was done digitally. We used our e-government website, gosuslugi.ru, and we also used those digital tablets. So remember, 2010, it took us 1 year to produce the results. We pieced together data, we harmonized the data, we normalized them, and currently the Russian Statistics Office says that by April they will be able to release a huge area of data on census, and it's going to be available for the researchers.
And I would like to highlight that ROST at the end of the last year, so, well, they made a revolution on availability of census data because they allowed the sampling of 10% of data from 2010, and it was an opportunity for the partners to work, and it was the biggest sampling in the world available to researchers. And actually, last year, by that step, Rosstat could catch up our lagging as Russia, which was 10 to 15 years, and it was very good for political scientists, demographers. It was a breakthrough, and I believe that when we get data from 2020-2021 census, researchers would be ready to work with them much faster because they worked with data from previous censuses. And I would like to mention that the role of Rosstat, the Ministry of Economy, and Roskomnadzor was important because data were agreed at different levels, and all requirements on making data impersonal were met. And this is the question where a lot of attention is paid to. It was the first sparrow of joint work of the 3 ministers. And we also have the Emergency Situation Ministry, one of the agencies which is ahead of many others. And Mr. Nichiporchuk, what are your main successes from the last year? Maria, I would divide successes of the last year into 2 streams, the technology-based and cultural. You were correct. We launched our own data pool and tools for autonomous checkup of hypotheses involved, and departments which are in the structure of the ministry, they simulate the data and offer hypotheses. It was a cultural revolution, and we see that from the middle of the next year we have more and more employees that produce data and work with them, so they see them as values, not as a by-effect of their work. And the next important factor for involvement is that more and more senior managers treat conclusions based on the data and use them in their working practice. So what was the reason for it? Because the first half of the last year allowed us to launch large-scale models for predicting, for forecasting. And by the middle of the year, it became evident that the reliability is quite high, and it was the basis for the culture. So a cultural revolution inside is a big achievement of the last year. Yeah, I would agree. Also, Mikhail, Mr. Petrov, told about this when regular employees started to use data arrays, then of course they are more demanding to the quality of data. They start to emerge into the process, and at the end of the day you have good functional customers, well, who are rather partners in work. And I can't but ask, the largest data array is data of public services, gosuslugi, one single web portal. A lot of them relate to social services. So, Mr. Sergienko, what are the plans of the Ministry of Digital Development? What are the plans to improve the quality of data used for the public services? Do you have any plans for 2022 that can bring some exciting solutions to us? Okay, so our priority is speed on transferring public services into online mode. If you can get it here and now, you should do it. For this, we introduce the special web counter for agencies to publish their data, to make data available to consumers of these services. That's the main aspect. Aspect number two, if we would look at the very fast growth of public services, it's important to increase the speed. Sometimes to launch a service, you need to spend some months or even years if it's something complicated and comprehensive. The most important thing for us is to improve the speed to count in days or weeks. So you need those web counters and transparency in understanding of what data is available and where. So Mr. Petrov said about the tasks of the accounts chamber, and we need to have a single map of data with the regulations, with the descriptions of the data content for us to be able to use them as puzzle bits to launch a service supported by respective regulations. And another important aspect is we understand that the state knows a lot about us, about our real estate, our children, our families, and so on. It's important to avoid the situation when residents visit public agencies. The state should act as a single partner for a citizen, and we need to analyze the data array as one single array, respecting all requirements to data protection, so speed, connectivity, and the speed of launching new public services are their priorities, and data should help with that. Okay, I would like to add here, last year I was surprised, and I used public services a lot last year, like probably many of you, and those who listen to us. It's nowhere near comparable to what we had in previous years, but if we would look at the backside, I was amazed by interactive forums replicated in Russian regions. and words like low-code platforms or no-code platform for public services, or for transferring public services into electronic form, and the interactive forms which are filled in by the regions to add a service. So this is another important step when we all work with the processes, where we can add the rules, because quite often large companies that started to move to data, they invested a lot in data, but they forgot about processes. If you forget about the process, then you don't understand why you get data as they are. So the public services web portal is really moving forward, progressing. So given that we are restricted in terms of time, I would like to offer you to name a number of steps. Last year, the deputy ministers were mainly focused on the public services, because it was sort of a frontier where we had to catch up with resolving many tasks. So I hope that in 2022 data becomes the main focus point, as our public agencies are getting prepared for introducing artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence is based on data. So what would you suggest? What are the first steps to be taken in 2022 to make this year successful in terms of working with the data? Now let's begin with Mr. Sergienko, because like the first bit of advice is obvious. Well, some obvious things. I think that it's important to have a well-balanced team of professionals with technical specialists knowing Python, or those who would know SQL to write distributed queries. It's important to have that team to work as a uniform organism. Secondly, you need clear, well-agreed and measurable goals with the analytics or with the transaction system, where you need to have as little errors as possible, where you need master data. It's essential to have an agreement on the goals. Otherwise, there is a mess, and you have the computing resources, human resources. You need data available, because even when you have a good team, you can have problems with access to data. And also, last year, in 2021, our plans for digital transformation, we published a number of recommendations to the leaders of digital transformations, 6 key recommendations. So, first of all, data should be documented. We need to realize what's the data array, what it consists of. And at federal level, you have data processing centers that are involved in that. Well, we also need to establish criteria for checking data accuracy. You need criteria and rules that will be different for different data areas. And if we talk about accounting system and analytics, it's essential to process data quality cases, to have to close the loop. So this is the way I see it. Okay, thank you. Anatoly, over to you. Well, I would like to support Victor and say that you need to start with culture. If you don't have the leaders which are interested, it's very hard to move for the first head. And in regions and for federal agencies, you need to prove that you need the budget for data. And data for the sake of data, is looking like a matter of curiosity. You need to understand what data you need, and your goals should be clear and measurable. They should be clear for the leaders. As for the cases, my team was doing the digital transformation in Novosibirsk region, building for the multifunctional center. As for efficiency, you need to measure performance of employees at the most remote regions to retrain people, and we could measure how satisfied people were with the services they were getting from the multifunctional centers. And there was a comprehensive approach. The operator was guided by the system in terms of what else could be recommended. So about the quick wins, we need an access, quick wins, and measurable and clear goals. Mikhail, I would like to extend on that, on what Anatoly just said, and Victor as well. Culture is key. And then you need to think on how you develop the culture. You need to create growth points to crystallize this system, the point from where changes would start. And how do you find them? You need to raise in yourself a skillful consumer, a customer, to find people that would be interested in technology that would work, not just in theory, something you find on the web, but practically. You need to compare what happens when when you introduce new technologies. You improve your performance a lot when you find people that get a direct effect from technologies, and you can use the example to show others how to work. So that's goal number one. And so this is where the digital transformation path should start from. So before I ask Victor, and then we'll have a question for a very short last question. And now, could you please think about tips, bits of advice. Let's imagine in 2023, on the 14th of January, we are back to the studio, this room, and I would ask you, what makes you proud analyzing the outcomes of 2022? What would be the main goal you formulate for 2023, and to be able to say next year that we managed to do it? Victor, well, as somebody focused on practice, I would like to summarize that actually CDOs, the leaders of data, they should be merged in data as much as possible. Otherwise, you cannot guarantee the quality of data. The next tip, well, you need to ensure involvement. But how do you do it? Well, actually, due to quick wins. For quick wins, you need to register the register or checklist of problems which are relevant, and the register of data islands scattered all across the organization. So if an organization keeps working, then it means that it uses data. Then you need cross-links to identify effects, to find places where data work, and move to more complex things, building up strategic projects on resolving more complex problems. That would be my tip to beginners. And actually for 2022, as I said, we were quite good in making employees involved in work with the data. But it is still a junior level. The statistics, the dashboards, the SQL, as it was mentioned. And from February, we would launch training courses internally for machine learning and data analytics. And the dream is to have, well, I'm not talking about data scientists now, but I would like as many employees as possible to move from descriptions to forecasting and prediction to advanced levels. Would you be proud if you would tell that functional departments produced a model, a predicting model that allowed us to achieve the result in 2022? Well, as for me, the result is when the departments use our tools. If every department completes 3 or 4 projects, and even without us using people we trained, well, it would be a big celebration for me. Anatoly, Maria, you know, we reported recently on the situation with data sets in agencies, and about 40% of them were not relevant, were not in demand. And I know that you can help us with that in future, and we would like to change the situation for relevant data sets and data sets in demand. For all the federal agencies, it should be for the benefit of everyone, not just to cater for curiosity of 1 or 2 people. And goals I set in front of my department, and I think the Ministry of Digital Technologies can support me. It's important to use the forecasting models to quickly assess efficiency of measures supporting the industry. Sergey, 30 seconds, please. I would say that the public services are moved to the online track, and we will have several dozens of web counters in a year. We will have some arrangements for improving data quality in 2 or 3 key ministries, and the counters should be used to the source for the data lake. So the 4th SMF should become useful. So it took us a lot to launch the process. So 2022 is key as a year for us. Yeah, I would like to wish you every possible success, and I would like to see you all back here in 1 year's time. And so all of you were involved in the project on data navigator for federal agencies, and people who work in the public sectors need to start with something, to have checklists. So let's wish everyone to have a better quality of data in 2022, and in 2023 I would like to have a discussion on that. Thank you, and see you back.